Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Before we get into today's upload, I'd like to share some links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Alright guys, like I said in last night's second half, today is my birthday, and I probably won't put a second half out today. Just want to kind of take the day and spend it with my daughters, probably go out to dinner and then up to the lake and just enjoy a fall evening. But today, I want to share an experience that I really have thought about since day one, since this subscriber sent it to me. It has really had me searching the internet for where this state park or national park is, and or campground, and find out more information. This person reached out to me first before he shared this experience with any other channel, and he then shared it with a couple other channels because he was looking for looking for people who were at the campground, hopefully came away from the experience with photo or video evidence. So this experience has troubled me for a while now. And with the new mic, I figured I'd give it some justice. So here goes. In the first week of May of 2020, I had an encounter that I'm still having problems coming to terms with. And due to reasons I will explain, I am not comfortable with giving my name or the details of exactly where this happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm a lover of the outdoors, and in the past few years, I have not had the time to really get out into nature and get my much-needed dose of the natural world. In 2019, I opened my own online business, and due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic, the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of this year. I have 2 children who are now very responsible and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at the local hospital and is considered an essential worker, so the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I turned 40 years old this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I had some time on my hands and I was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with a laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days and go fishing and breathe some fresh air. Neither of my teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work. So I took my best friend with me, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he is incredibly lazy, and I never have to worry about him running off to chase deer or anything. He'll lie on his blanket next to the fire all day and night unless I make him head out with me. But, as I have learned while camping with Pete, If coyotes, bears, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of his laziness and protects the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he is a 120-pound muscle with no fat, which always blows my mind because of how lazy and inactive he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back. But this time I decided that I wanted to have as many comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV and filled it with all of the things I would want to really be comfy. I brought my full-size backyard grill, a 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers full of food, and a fancy 6-person tent. The campground I decided to go to is a large one that is mostly used by the RV kind of crowd. But on the far end, right next to the best fishing area, they have a half a dozen of just plain old campsites with no power or water hookups. My campsite was bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from a large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rock overhangs and small caves. It is a beautiful area, and I love falling asleep to the sound of water. I set the camp up so that my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy make sort of a U shape and block most of the view into my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week, starting on Friday, May 1st, which was the first day that the state opened the state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shutdown in March. I arrived at the campground at about midday on Friday and placed as packed. I spent most of the day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking ribeye steaks, burgers, and vegetables on the grill. The weather in central Pennsylvania in early May is pretty much perfect, so I decided to sleep in the tent each night with Pete, and turned my trailer into my mobile office where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work for about an hour each morning, get my orders packed up, and then drive 20 minutes to the nearest town once every few days and get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and kids to just sell everything and move into the woods and live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see, so I decided to do some hiking and exploring into the surrounding wilderness with Pete, instead of fighting 10 people for the same one fish all day. It felt great to get out to where I belong, the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off all weekend while I was hiking, but to be honest, when you camp in Pennsylvania, you should expect to get rained on regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 3rd, the campground cleared out fast, and by sundown, there were only a few active campsites left. I had gotten to know the 2 guys in the campsite directly next to mine, and we hung out for a few nights. While we drank some hot tea, they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me as their next-door neighbor, with my full-size grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next days, I worked online, fished the creek, explored the mountains of the area on foot with my dog. We also liked to just walk the campground itself and stop to talk with scattered campers who were there during the weekday. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made his way into the more accessible side of the campground and raided their camps the night before. This had me a little concerned because I had a full-sized grill sitting out in the open at my camp that had been cooking delicious food for days on end. I debated putting the grill inside of my enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central Pennsylvania has a rather large bear population, and I was already aware of this. So at night I slept with a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck in the tent with Pete, and just in case a rogue bear posed danger to us. I had forgotten to pack my Ruger Red Hawk 44 mag for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my S&W Shield 45 ACP that I already had on my hip when I left home. It's not ideal, but I figured it was better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my friends and I cooked up some barbecued chicken thighs, baked beans, and baked some potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil in my fire pit. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made a few orange soda spiked drinks to go with our fancy campsite dinner. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had worn us all out pretty early. So we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night. A night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. At about 10 p.m. I loaded 4 shells of buckshot into my shotgun, got into the tent, got it all squared away, and lied down in the tent next to my dog on his bed and blanket. I put some Citizen Journalist news on my phone and put one headphone in my right ear and kept my left ear clear to listen to my surroundings and to enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to the tree line with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs and insects at night was super loud and is kind of a song that puts me to sleep better than any lullaby could ever do. The next thing I remember is waking up and my eyes popping open to some kind of hollow metallic noise outside of my campsite. I lie there perfectly still with my heart slamming from a quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang! I heard the lid on my grill slam shut. I had stuck a fairly bright solar-powered motion light to the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped courtyard area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on, and someone or something was moving around my camp casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he's still lying down, but his head was up and his eyes were as big as ping-pong balls. He was clearly hearing what I was hearing, but I found it strange that he was silent. It was then that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs and insects in the woods behind me was not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was a hoarse, deep breathing, and that was when I thought to myself, bear. I could hear it walking around, thump, thump, thump. And next, I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat up and grabbed my shotgun. One thing about black bears is that they are not the bravest animals, and any man-made noise will almost always make them run for their lives. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered a shell. Instead of running off, the creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. And to my horror, it started walking towards my tent. It was then that I saw its shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came right up to the front of my tent, breathing like a gigantic monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, I have a 12 gauge pointed right at you. So you'd better sound off who you are." Right then it leaned forward right up to my tent and let out the most terrifying and deep growl I had ever heard in my life. At that moment Pete whined softly and cowardly, his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had the giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it was growling at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight at this creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw the eyes light up like a golden LED light. It turned its head towards the flashlight, and I could hear the men gasp and say, "Holy!" Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. I decided that if I didn't do something, this thing was going to kill us. So I lied back onto my sleeping bag, took aim at the shadow of the monster's head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. This creature screamed and roared at the same time. It was like a death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a large lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking ferociously. The thing ran off, and from what I could tell from the loud thump, It ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up and quickly unzipped my tent and poked my head outside to see. It got up on its feet and then ran right into the picnic table and did a flip onto the ground. It started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see that there was blood everywhere on the trailer. I jumped out of my tent while chambering another round. I aimed as best I could with my whole body shaking violently, and right as it started to get up again, I shot it a second time. I'm not entirely sure that I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up and I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it. I was so terrified and taken back at how tall this thing was when it stood up that I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire up behind me, turning to see my neighbor unloading a large revolver into this werewolf-looking thing at maybe 20 yards. The creature was on its side and was kind of running in circles on the ground, gurgling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it was gasping. As it was doing this death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer toward me. I tried to pump the gun again and was shaking so bad that it took 3 attempts. Before the last shell chambered, I just pointed and shot without aiming, and I could see the hump on the back of its neck rip open and spray blood and flesh all over the place. I was really close to it at this point. The monster stopped flipping out. Its limbs were twitching while its head remained fully animated and flopping back and forth for at least another 10 seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it and tried to stand up. I realized once I had stood up that I'd been holding my breath the whole time. And when I had gotten to my feet, my vision started to go black and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed my arms and started pulling me hard backwards away from the creature. I stood up shaking badly and looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of terror. When I started looking around, there was at least another 5 people showing up there with the same kind of wild-eyed expression. I saw that at least 3 of them had come over with their guns. People were yelling and asking each other what had happened and checking to see if I was injured because I had blood on my clothes and face. It all happened quickly, but as is often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed like it was in slow motion to me. My dog's still barking and going crazy, so I did my best to calm him down. When I hugged him, he was shaking as much as I was. Before long, a small crowd had formed and people were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached the thing as it lay there, still occasionally twitching, and we all stood over it, saying WTF over and over. Eventually, we all started saying, "It's a werewolf," in disbelief. All at once, people all started taking pictures with their phone. Mine was still in the tent. The wolf man was dead. The top half of its head was basically gone, including both its eyes and the top of its snout. I assumed that was the first shot I had made from the tent. The front of its neck was completely shredded, and the back of its neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what other injuries it had sustained, as it was completely covered from head to toe with blood. But we were all pretty sure it had taken buckshot or .357 Magnums to the chest as well. There was a small river of blood running through the camp and right past my tent from the puddle that surrounded this creature. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few moments we summoned the courage to grab some big sticks and flip this thing over onto its back. It most definitely was a male, as it had a huge set of balls, bigger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I had ever seen. It had dog-like legs and weird-shaped paws with kind of small heels for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed it was able to balance such a big body on feet so small. It had really skinny lower legs and pretty thick upper legs. It had arms pretty much like a human with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws, maybe 3 to 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half of a finger from the battle. Then the second wave of terror hit us all at once. The howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see that same big-eyed look go over everyone's face, I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded my shotgun with a full 5 rounds this time and grabbed my .45 as well and clipped it to my side inside of my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at this werewolf and was looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up for a few minutes, and we could hear the howling getting further and further away. The police and game wardens, along with the paramedics, showed up all at once. I could see from the flashing lights that they had blocked the entrance to the campground up the hill off in the distance. The police were just as surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw the creature. The 2 game wardens looked worried, not surprised. They told everyone not to take any more pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the whole time from then on. The paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital and get checked out, but I refused. The only injury I had was to my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days from all the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looked worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and the revolver from my neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away, and anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off of their phones, which was not much of a problem, as only a few people's phones got signal at the campground. When I asked the game wardens what the hell that thing was, they told me they didn't know, but that it looked like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys show up. They were all carrying large Glocks and dressed in cargo pants and t-shirts. They immediately took me and the others who were involved aside and began questioning us. They told me that they were federal fish and game. They were very interested in the howling we had heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about where it was, how close it sounded, and what it sounded like. They also repeated to me 100 times that I was not to tell anyone what happened, and that they would get to the bottom of things and find out what I had encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assumed they told my neighbor and anyone else who was at the scene the same thing. They made us open our phones and go through our photos and delete any pics we had taken. They also told me that if any pictures were to come out of this creature, that it would spell trouble for anyone who had had them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They didn't try to pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and very politely asked me not to talk about it and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only 2 hours before the Dogman showed up. By about 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten to everyone in the campground, and I assumed that the other people were told it was a bear and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said it wasn't safe, and they had to close the campground until they were sure it was safe. After the Dogman was bagged and tagged, a small fire truck was brought in, and all the blood was hosed off of my trailer, vehicle, and tables, and everything else, and the blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped down my trailer and vehicle with soapy water and hosed them off again. Regular old duct tape was put over the holes on my trailer, and they took my tent, bloody clothes, bloody slippers as evidence, along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave me my shotgun back, wiped down and unloaded. They also told me to fill up my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times to me. Since all this, I have learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listened to Dogman and Wolfman encounters day and night, and that is how I came across your channel. I figured I'd reach out to you. I'm amazed that the authorities are able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wrap. I've been searching for anyone who came forward with anything about the campground closing in the news. Nothing. I'm not interested in putting myself out there any more than I just did for now. I'm also scared of these agents, as I am of the Dogman. but all in all, they seemed genuinely concerned for my well-being. So after that, I shared this experience and reached out to him and said, wow, that's absolutely amazing. He then emails me back, I believe, about 2 weeks later. I was reading through the comments on the show with my experience. A few people had questions, it seems. No, none of the guys in the Denali had long guns, just large Glocks. I asked the older Southern guy what kind it was, and he said a Glock 20 10mm. I really didn't give all that much detail in the description of this creature looking back into my email to you. The dead Dogman smelled horrible, like the combination of barnyard animal mixed with strong dog piss. Also, it did have a tail, a small tail, maybe 2 feet at the longest. The Dogman was a dark brown all over. Oddly enough, I do remember that it had some lighter brown stripes on its arms where the blood wasn't totally soaked in. In the upper arm area, had fluffy fur, not that sparse hairy thing I hear others talk about in their encounters. This one was fully covered in fur, like an actual dog, even its arms and legs. But when it stood up in front of me, it did seem to have some white on the middle of its chest. I could be wrong because I only saw it that way for a second. The next time I saw its chest, it was covered completely in blood. The skin on the tip of its snout and under its bottom jaw were both sheared off by the buckshot. But its teeth were undamaged. As it lay there, it had its mouth open, and its teeth were very weird. All of them were pointed and seemed like they would fit together, like shark's teeth or an alligator. The teeth were bloody but visible. They seemed unnatural to me. My college major involved the study of teeth and fossils, so I have a good understanding of tooth structure and which type of teeth are designed for what. And it would seem that its teeth would only be useful for biting large chunks of flesh off to be swallowed whole, like a shark or a gator. They were not reminiscent of a normal canine teeth in that way. After listening to hundreds of encounters in the past month, a common theme is that they seem to like the softer inner organs of their prey, while often leaving the meat behind. I wonder if that's because they swallow their food in large chunks, and obviously softer organs would be much easier than dealing with bone and tougher muscle. Just a thought. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I have to say this. There was a feeling of something supernatural from the beginning. I cannot describe it, but a feeling of something supernatural was even in the air when I thought it was a bear. It was like everything felt wrong and reality had ceased to exist for that moment. How would every frog and insect for hundreds of yards know to be quiet? Why would a land animal like a dogman have teeth like an alligator or a shark? How did it keep flipping out and running around with its brains falling out of the top of its head? The very air around me felt like it had a weird charge. I feel like there's something important about these creatures that we just don't quite understand, something supernatural. Give me some time and I'll get a Skype number together this week or next and give you a call. What's a good day and a time for you usually? So I respond, give them a time and a day, and then I get this. I trust that you're a good person and all, but I fear that they may be watching you due to your other uploads of yours that I've listened to about that guy named Victor. I find it interesting that one of the agents that really had me cornered for a while that night had a thick southern accent. I suppose he may have come from Virginia. I will see if I can put together an online phone number and call you while on a proxy server. I'm sorry for the paranoia, but like I said, my life has been going very well with the exception of this encounter. I'm terrified of those guys, the agents, messing up my life. I can't afford things to go sideways for my family and myself right now. My state of mind is pretty jumpy these days. I won't even take trash cans out without a big revolver. If I do get set up together to call you, what's the best time? If you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and email them to me. I will make sure to check this account for you each day. I wait a couple of weeks, or about a week, I'd say, maybe a couple. And I get this. I've been having weird things going on. Someone's been calling my phone from different international phone numbers and hanging up on me after 10 seconds of silence. I can tell it's a landline by the noise it makes when they hang up. It also lets me know that it's an actual person and not a robocall. A black SUV with a guy who wears a headset with a microphone had been outside of my home in early mornings. He leaves right before 6:30 a.m., right about the beginning of when rush hour starts. Yesterday, a white Range Rover pulled into my driveway in the middle of the day. I happened to be working in my kitchen when it happened, so I was facing the window when they did. I saw the two guys in the vehicle sitting there, scanning my house and talking to each other. I always carry a gun now, even when I'm home alone with the kids. So I popped the button on my holster security strap and went to the front door, quickly opening it. The two guys looked at me, casually pulled out of my driveway. I did notice that they had not a state plate because it was plain white, definitely not Delaware. I'm sorry for this, Jeff, but I'm going to have to stop corresponding for a while. I can't help but notice that this stuff started happening after I contacted you. I could be just paranoid, but like I told you previously, I have a happy and almost perfect life right now. I have a lot to lose. I hope you understand. Feel free to let your listeners know. So about a half a year goes by, and I reach out and I say, hey, it's Jeff Nadolny. How are you? I'm reaching out to make sure you're okay. I'd love to speak with you sometime, and of course would honor your stipulations, Jeff. He responds to me a couple days back. I'm fine. I haven't seen anything weird or had any Men in Black type watching me for a while now. I've made up my mind to not do any kind of interviews or talk directly to anyone for their safety as well as my own. I'm still shocked that none of the pictures taken that night slipped through any cracks or came out online. I've made up my mind to just send the encounter to other cryptid channels and give it more exposure. I have to think that more than one of those people there that night had gone online looking to see if this experience had made it into the world beyond our campsite experience. So, I am hoping that someone with more balls than me found a way to hide a few pics or a few minutes of video from the guys in the SUV and will anonymously leak them out somehow. Thanks for doing your part to spread the word of my experience as well as many others. If I had not had this experience that I did, I certainly would have looked at these stories like those of your source Victor was ridiculous. But I would imagine that a real-life monster roaming into populated campsites and neighborhoods, that the government would indeed have some kind of task force to deal with them. Don't worry about me, I'm fine. So let's hope someone else has a few pics that can break this thing wide open. So I let it be. And in April, I sent him an email. And I just said, hey sir, it's Jeff Nadolny. And you had shared your fishing experience with me before you had reached out to others. I hope all is well. I was curious if you were able to find any people who had been there that fateful night. I really would love to speak with you sometime about your experience. And if you'd ever be interested in doing an interview, I could disguise your voice and anonymously. Anonymity is first and foremost. I know you're worried about your business. I would never jeopardize that. Please let me know. Even if there is no interview, at least have a conversation with me. God bless, Jeff. Experience has driven me insane for the last 2 years. I have scoured maps, looked for news clippings, any kind of news of parks closing a month after they were, or a week after they were reopened. Nothing. I didn't get a response from the email that I had sent. I didn't really expect one because he was using a throwaway email address. But I still to this day would love just to talk with him. Not even to do an interview, just to hear him discuss that evening. And yeah, so if you are listening out there, please contact me. I'd just love to talk. And with that, my friends, that is my birthday upload. And I want to thank you for spending 40 minutes of my birthday with me. And may the Great Spirit watch over us all. May He guide us down that path that we call life.